Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new episode of World's Panorama, the only show that gives you a 360 view of major global news in the most concise, direct and unbiased reports. I'm Sana Khan. Before we get to detailed reports, here's a look at the top stories this week. ASEAN summit breaks down over South China Sea disputes. Members fail to draft South China Sea statement. Pakistan set for fresh government court slugfest. Judges order new PM to reopen graft cases against Asif Ali Zardari. UN Security Council divided over sanctions threat to Syria. Over 200 massacred in Syrian government forces attack. It's a first for Olympics and a breakthrough as Saudi Arabia names 2 women in London 2012 team. A detailed report. Our focus this week is on the just concluded ASEAN summit in Cambodia. The week-long ASEAN foreign ministers' meetings ended on Friday in Phnom Penh without a joint communique as members failed to reach a consensus on the thorny South China Sea issue. Although participants had hoped to make headway on a binding code of conduct to govern the way China and Southeast Asian nations settle their disputes in the resource-rich waters, talks foundered after China insisted the forum wasn't the appropriate place to discuss the matter. Let's delve deeper into the result of the summit and what leaders came up with or even failed to achieve. Joining me in the studio this time is former ambassador and former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, Rajiv Sikri. A warm welcome to you, sir. But before that, why don't we have a look at this detailed report?
Days of heated diplomacy ended in failure as splits over territorial disputes with China prevented Southeast Asian nations from issuing their customary joint statement at a summit on Friday. The 10 members of Southeast Asian regional body ASEAN have been trying to agree on a long-stalled code of conduct for the disputed South China Sea, home to vital shipping lanes, to help settle overlapping claims.
If we issue a joint communique as we did in Bali, then we would be talking about the South China Sea, but we would not reach a conclusion on this issue because there is no consensus. That's why some ASEAN members are taking the failure of issuing a joint communique as an excuse for some ASEAN nations and China to have a justified reason to be at odds with each other.
Critics have accused Cambodia of siding with China in the issue, which gives the country large amounts of aid, but Cambodia insisted it was neutral.
We do not take the side of any country in bilateral conflict. We are not a court to judge bilateral conflict, no matter who is the winner or who is the loser, who the land belongs to, who the island belongs to, or who the sea belongs to.
The developments may also mark a setback for the US's agenda in the region, which includes efforts to bolster ASEAN so that it can more effectively resist China's expanding influence in the region. India too has high stakes in the South China Sea. State-owned ONGC has undertaken hydrocarbon exploration, which has been opposed by China. India wants peaceful resolution of the issue through dialogue.
All outstanding issues must be resolved peacefully through a process of a dialogue and discussion, and those dialogue and discussions should be taking place without any intimidation or without any pressure tactics.
6 different countries, including Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei and Taiwan, have been arguing about ownership of these waters for decades. But China has taken a particularly strident approach to the dispute, claiming practically the entire South China Sea as its indisputable sovereign territory. For a long time, the claimants were happy to let the quarrel simmer quietly in the background. But the promise of huge hydrocarbon reserves under the seabed has significantly raised the stakes in recent years. With China's main Asian rival now wading into the dispute, the potential for military confrontation has once again surfaced.
All right, let me get in Ambassador Sikri at this point. Sir, what do you make of the developments at the ASEAN summit? No consensus, no joint communique for the first time in the history of ASEAN. That's been 45 years.
That's quite extraordinary, actually. And I think it just brings out the intensity and depth of feeling on both sides on this issue. The Philippines, which has this dispute, one of the countries that had this dispute with China, was very insistent on this point, but Cambodia, which is widely perceived as China's ally in ASEAN and is seen to be doing the Chinese bidding, refused to include a reference even to this dispute in the communique. So I think it signals two or three things. One, there's a clear split in ASEAN now.
Right.
The whole idea of ASEAN was that collectively they should be able to present a united front and you know, have greater leverage in their dealings with the rest of the world. That clearly hasn't happened. Secondly, I think that China's obduracy on this matter reflects some of the problems that China is having internally. They're going to have a new party congress, a new leadership coming up. And at this point, no political leader in China, I think, wants to be seen as being weak.
Okay.
When there's so much turmoil going around in China, there's the Bo Xilai affair, and there are more purges which are, or changes of personnel which are underway, we are told. I think the Chinese political leadership is very cautious lest they be accused by other factions in the party or by the public of saying, you know, you are letting us down. There's a growing Chinese nationalism on which the Communist Party is riding, and this is a very dangerous trend that is happening.
Right. Also, Ambassador Sikri, the first point that you made about the divide that's you know, emerging more and more, explain to us you know, how far the US's role is responsible for that, if you believe so.
Well, this is an old dispute between China and the Southeast Asian countries.
Right.
Over the last couple of years, the United States has signaled that it has a going to play a more active role in the region, greater military assets and so forth. They even have a treaty with the Philippines, which is a treaty ally. But when it comes to the crunch, they are unwilling to support their allies. Now, as far as I'm aware, Hillary Clinton preferred to take a neutral stand in the dispute, because the Chinese and the Americans have got lots of things to sort out. And the
But on the other hand, she also made quite an important visit to Laos as well.
True. You see, so the symbolism is there, but when it comes to, you know, actually backing one of its treaty allies against China, they backed off.
Right.
So I think this does not give too much confidence to the countries in the region, as well as Japan and Korea, that, you know, if it really comes to a crunch, they won't have the Americans on their side. So it's okay to have the rhetoric and the talk, but when it comes to action on the ground, I think the United States is seen to be lacking in any resolve to stand by its allies. That's another conclusion.
So Cambodia now siding with China and standoff with the Philippines. Do you think that this friction that we are getting to see could really contaminate, you know, future course of negotiations, and to what extent?
Negotiations over the dispute?
The dispute, yeah.
Well, the fundamental argument is whether it should be handled bilaterally, as China is saying, or that ASEAN as a whole should be involved in this matter. If it is handled bilaterally, then China can easily pick a...
Which is what China wants, but even
exactly,
India is in favor.
They are much stronger than the individual ASEAN countries. But if China presents ASEAN presents a united stand, then it becomes a little more difficult for China. That is what China is resisting. And countries like Cambodia or Laos, which are relatively small and weak and dependent on China, feel that their national interests are better served by not picking a fight with China on this issue. Whereas for the Philippines, it's an existential problem. It's right next door. This is territory that the Philippines claims. So that's why I think that we can expect a considerable intra-ASEAN tension on this matter.
And lastly, just to conclude, let's talk a bit about India. We heard S.M. Krishna very clearly saying that we need to resolve these issues as soon as possible. And India again in favor of collective talks rather than what China wants, that is bilateral talks, with each of the disputes.
Well, we have been quite careful in our statements. We don't have a direct interest there because there's no territorial dispute.
Right.
Our main concern is the freedom of navigation.
The ONGC blocks that we have.
Well, the ONGC, some of them, ONGC has given them up for commercial reasons, we are told. And also, when it comes to our territorial disputes with China, these countries do not back us. So there's no reason for us to be going out on a limb to support them. These are little delicate issues, and I think that while reiterating our support for the principle of open seas and freedom of navigation, it is best to stay out of territorial disputes because these are not countries who are going to be supporting us also.
Okay, all in all, Ambassador Sikri, we all know a great deal is at stake as far as the South China Sea dispute is concerned. But thanks so much for joining me on the show this week and bringing out some of the very important points that we need to take a look at before we go ahead and see what the solution could be. Thanks once again. With that, we take a very short break. But after that, there's tragic news of the worst mountain disaster in France for more than a decade. Stay tuned for more. Thanks for staying with us. Now, pressure mounted on Syrian strongman Bashar al-Assad on Thursday after a first senior diplomat, his ambassador to Baghdad, defected, and Western powers drew up a 10-day sanctions ultimatum. Meanwhile, Syria now would face a United Nations sanctions under a Security Council resolution drafted by Western powers seeking to overcome the Russian resistance to measures that would hasten the fall of President Assad.
Syria's ambassador to Iraq, Nawaf al-Fariz, announced on an Arabic television channel on Wednesday that he had defected and joined the opposition forces against President Bashar al-Assad.
I announced my resignation as Syria's ambassador to Iraq. I also announced my withdrawal from the Baath Party, and I call on all party members to do the same, because the regime has transformed into a tool to oppress the people and their aspirations to freedom and dignity.
Meanwhile, at the United Nations, Britain, France, Germany and the United States submitted a draft text that would give Assad 10 days to implement the UN Arab League envoy Kofi Annan's ceasefire plan or face tough new sanctions.
The Council is now discussing what the next step should be and what action they should take. And so we should hear something from them in the next few days.
The deeply divided 15-member council must decide the future of a UN observer mission in Syria, known as UNSMIS, before July 20th, when its 90-day mandate expires.
The fact is that UNSMIS, regrettably, is not at present able to do the job that this council mandated it to do because of the regime's persistent refusal to take the basic steps to halt the violence.
Annan plunged into a tussle between the major powers on Tuesday, insisting that Iran, which strongly backs Assad and is regarded as an adversary of the West and Gulf Arabs, had a role to play in the drive to relaunch stalled peace efforts and begin talks towards a political transition. The United States disapproves the inclusion of Iran in Syria talks.
Egypt's Constitutional Court's decision on Tuesday night to cancel President Mohamed Morsi's reinstatement of the People's Assembly has provoked an angry response from Egyptian Islamists. The rising differences between the army, judiciary and the Brotherhood are seen as an Islamist power struggle which is still in its transition period.
Egypt's High Court moved swiftly to block the Islamist-dominated parliament only hours after the legislature's first meeting in weeks, turning a political row between the Muslim Brotherhood and the military into a constitutional crisis. The Supreme Constitutional Court suspended a decree issued on Sunday by newly inaugurated President Mohamed Morsi that had reversed the military leadership's earlier order to dissolve parliament.
The Muslim Brotherhood came here to cause destruction in the court session. That's why lawyers stood against them. We are here to discuss the president's wrongful decree. They violated the law, and the Constitutional Court's verdict has the power of the law. President Morsi can't bring back the parliament from the dead.
While some members backed the president's move to reconvene the assembly, Speaker Saad Al-Katatni said that the aim of the restored house was not to challenge the Supreme Constitutional Court and judicial rulings.
The President's decision restores rights to their rightful owners and balances power between authorities. This is a kind of fulfillment of his promise, the return of the country's institutions and the return of the power supervision.
Thousands of Brotherhood supporters crowded Tahrir Square on Tuesday in a show of support for the parliament, demanding it should still be allowed to work until early elections are held after a new constitution is passed.
Morsi is correcting the situation. He's not changing the law or destroying the constitutional court. There is no authority greater than the people, not the law, not the constitution, not the court, not the president.
The parliament was elected over the course of 6 weeks beginning in November under a complex voting procedure which the court later ruled was unconstitutional, declaring the lower house void. The unusual speed with which the High Court quashed Mr. Morsi's decision laid bare a new reality of Egypt's political playing field.
All right, with that, time now to take a look at some of the other international news in a quick wrap.
Pakistan's Supreme Court on Thursday ordered the country's new Prime Minister Raja Parvez Ashraf to reopen corruption cases against President Asif Ali Zardari. The move came out after the government introduced a law to protect senior figures from being ousted from power by judges. It marks the latest round in a bitter struggle between government and judiciary. Last month, the Supreme Court disqualified Yusuf Raza Gilani after he was convicted of contempt of court for refusing to resume corruption investigations against Zardari. The court ordered his successor to comply with the order by 25th of July or risk conviction, raising the prospect of a second Prime Minister being ousted in quick succession. Hillary Clinton returned to the scene of one of the darkest episodes of US foreign policy when she visited Laos and saw firsthand the aftermath of America's secret war in which around 2 million tons of bombs were dropped on the country. Clinton was the first US Secretary of State to visit the Southeast Asian nation since 1955, and she vowed US would do more to help the victims. Clinton described her visit as a painful reminder of the legacy of the Vietnam War era and said that in Laos the past is always with us. The small French alpine town of Chamonix awoke in shock on Friday following an avalanche a day earlier that killed 9 climbers, who were swept away by a wall of snow as they tried to scale one of Europe's tallest peaks. 3 Britons, 3 Germans, 2 Spaniards and 1 Swiss died in the incident, in which a 6-meter deep wall of snow engulfed mountain climbers scaling the Mont Blanc range. A preliminary investigation suggests a climber may have stepped on an icy patch, unwittingly triggering the giant slide. An Al-Qaeda suicide bomber killed at least 22 police cadets in the Yemeni capital of Sana'a on Wednesday afternoon. Just 5 days after the terrorist group sent warning messages to intelligence services that an attack would strike police institutions in days. Blood was splattered everywhere as the scene was cordoned off by police investigators after ambulances transported the dead and injured cadets to nearby hospitals. Other police cadets at the site were taken to the police station to cooperate with the investigation.
Time for a very short break. After that, good news for Olympics, which can now claim to have the gender equality that its charter has always called for. watching World Panorama. The London Olympics will be the first to include female athletes from every competing nation. This has been possible after Saudi Arabia decided to allow 2 female athletes to compete at the Olympic Games, overturning a decades-old taboo imposed by the conservative Muslim monarchy, which still bars women from sports at home. Take a look. Saudi Arabia has agreed to send female athletes to the Olympics for the first time, with a judoka and an 800-meter runner to represent the kingdom in London later this month. Wodja Ali Siraj Abdul Rahim Sherkhani, who will compete in the plus 78 kg category in judo, and runner Sara Attar will be the first Saudi women ever to take part at the Games after talks between IOC and the country paid off.
Well, we had a good dialogue with them, and then we were able to persuade them to send women to the Games. And this is a very important decision because it's a very symbolic one. It's very important because, you know, it's a human right. Women have the right to practice sport, and they want to practice it. They love sport, they are attracted to sport, and we must make sure that barriers are broken down.
The news is a dream come true for Saudi athletes.
A big inspiration for participating in the 2012 Olympics for me is being one of the first women for Saudi Arabia to be going. It's such a huge honor, and I hope that it can really make some good strides for women over there to get more involved in the sport.
I want to make a history for my country, Brunei, for being the first female athlete to represent my country for the Olympic. And I'm looking forward to set my new record for my personal best and also for Brunei.
In the past months, human rights group had been urging the IOC to ban Saudi Arabia from the Games if it did not agree to send women athletes. The decision means that every single country competing in the Olympics will be represented by male and female athletes. The conservative Muslim kingdom is one of 3 countries alongside Brunei and Qatar never to have sent female athletes, but the latter 2 confirmed earlier this year that their delegation would include women. And now brace yourself for the latest sporting action in our next report. Here's all the news from the world of sports.
Roger Federer beat Andy Murray 4-6, 7-5, 6-3, 6-4 on Sunday to win a record-equaling 7th Wimbledon title and his 17th Grand Slam crown. The Swiss third seed recovered from a sluggish start to dominate the match and return to the top of the world rankings. He made the decisive break in a marathon 6th game and broke for 3-2 in the 4th set before clinching victory on his second match point in 3 hours 24 minutes. Lance Armstrong has refiled a lawsuit against the US anti-doping agency hours after it issued life bans against 3 of his former associates. Armstrong's initial 80-page complaint was thrown out on Monday, but he has submitted a shorter 25-page suit asking a federal judge in Austin to prevent the case from going forward. Armstrong claims USADA offered fellow professional cyclists corrupt inducements to testify against him. Armstrong could lose his 7 Tour de France titles if found guilty. Manchester City manager Roberto Mancini signed a new 5-year contract with the Premier League champions. Mancini replaced Mark Hughes in 2009 and guided City to FA Cup victory in 2011. 12 months later, the club secured its first English League championship in 44 years. Mancini's new contract runs until the summer of 2017. There have been reports that Mancini will be paid £7.5 million a year, making him English soccer's highest paid manager. Veteran South African wicket-keeper Mark Boucher announced his retirement from international cricket on Tuesday after sustaining an eye injury during the Tour of England. The 35-year-old was struck by a bail while standing up to the stumps on day 1 of the tour match against Somerset. He also thanked people for their support as he headed home onto a road of uncertain recovery.
Time now for all the very latest news from the world of movies and lifestyle. Here's our entertainment wrap.
Hollywood superstar Tom Cruise and his actress wife, Katie Holmes, settled their divorce on Monday in what a lawyer called a speedy resolution to a case that prompted questions over the raising of their daughter and the Church of Scientology. There had been speculation that Holmes had whisked 6-year-old daughter Suri away from the couple's Beverly Hills home. to New York City because she did not want the girl raised in the Church of Scientology. No word has come from either parent yet on what custody arrangements were reached. Bruce Willis was back on set on Sunday morning in the 5th series of the Die Hard film franchise entitled A Good Day to Die Hard. The Hollywood actor was joined on set by Australian Jay Courtney and German actor Sebastian Koch. Filming also involved the Hungarian military, with the Mi-24 helicopter being used to film scenes shot over the Hungarian capital. A Good Day to Die Hard has currently set its global rollout in cinemas in mid-February next year. Spider-Man spun his way back to the top of North American box office. The Amazing Spider-Man brought in $65 million over the weekend. That brings the domestic take to $140 million over its 6-day opening. Spidey added $129 million to its global haul this weekend, bringing total sales to more than $341 million. Finally, Angelina Jolie was in Bosnia to attend the Sarajevo Film Festival. While there, the actress and humanitarian was named one of the city's honorary citizens in recognition for her directorial debut in The Land of Blood and Honey.
That's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. I'll be back next week, same time, with more world news. As we wrap up, take a look at the story of 50 years of Rolling Stones, from their very earliest gigs through to their current worldwide superstardom. Goodbye and thanks for watching.